I believe there's some explanation for this universe, which you might call God.
Elon Musk just proved everyone wrong, which is not unusual. But what he proved is what's interesting. The billionaire revealed the real image of Jesus, and this has left Christians in awe. Elon managed to show everyone that the images we used to think was Christ were actually not him. So if all the pictures and status that hung in churches weren't Jesus Christ, who are they? And what does the real Jesus Christ look like? All very puzzling questions which we will answer in this video, so join us. The puzzle of Christ's image. The truth is, the image of Jesus has been a very controversial topic for centuries. It has been followed by belief which is not really accurate. You can't believe that someone would look a particular way just because of what you've heard about the person. And that's why Elon Musk was able to stand out. He used fact and history and research to actually get a hold of the true image of Jesus Christ. But while the true image of Jesus may have been revealed, there are questions that need to be answered. Like, what did people think Jesus looked like? Well, that brings us to Warner Salmon. Keep watching to find out more. Salmon was the one to paint the image of Jesus that became very popular. But how did he figure out what Jesus looked like? Well, imagine you're holding a picture of someone you've heard so much about, but you've never actually met. That's kind of like what Warner Salmon's painting of Jesus Christ is. It's a famous picture called the Head of Christ, and so many people around the world think of it when they hear the name Jesus. But that picture isn't what Jesus really looked like. Warner Salmon was an American artist in the 1990s, and he loved creating pictures that felt comforting and familiar. One day he had an idea for a painting that would help people imagine Jesus as someone kind and close to them, almost like a friend they could talk to. He wasn't trying to say that this is exactly what Jesus looked like. He was painting a feeling, a message of peace and gentleness. To make his image of Jesus, Salmon probably thought about what people in his time might find beautiful and noble. He gave Jesus soft, glowing hair and a calm face that looked very peaceful. But here's the thing. Salmon didn't have any old pictures or descriptions of Jesus to work from because there aren't any. The truth is, when Jesus lived on earth, no one drew or painted him.
Hold on, before you pay for yet another app to manage your team, let me introduce
Place called the Middle East, which we will dive into later. This wasn't what Jesus likely looked like at all. It's like drawing a picture of someone from your imagination and guessing how they might appear, even if it's not accurate. Salmon's Jesus looks more like the people from Salmon's culture than the real historical Jesus. So why does this picture still mean so much to so many people? Well, Salmon's painting became very popular because it was printed everywhere, in churches, schools, homes, and even on small cards people could carry in their pockets. It felt like having a reminder of Jesus that you could keep close. But even though it's loved, it doesn't show the real person. It's like when you imagine a character from a storybook and draw them your way. Your drawing is special because it shows what you feel about that character, but it's not what they truly look like if they were real. But the thought of it is just wild. The thought that something starting out as just an idea in an artist's mind became so popular that it's everywhere at such a time, almost like a favorite song or story everyone knows. That's truly what happened with this image. It spread so far and wide that people began to believe it was how Jesus really looked, even though there's no way anyone could know for sure. In the beginning, when Warner Salmon created the painting in the 1940s, he didn't expect it to become such a big deal. Salmon himself confessed that the painting was a miraculous vision that he received late one night. He was probably going through something because he stated that the answer came at 2 a.m., January 1924, as a vision in response to my prayer to God in a despairing situation. The painting showed Jesus as soft, glowing, and kind-looking, with flowing hair and gentle eyes. It wasn't based on history or facts about Jesus' actual appearance, but it captured a feeling that connected with people's hearts. Salmon didn't have to tell anyone it was accurate. The picture itself did all the convincing by being beautiful and calming to look at. The painting became famous very quickly, thanks to technology that was just becoming widely available at the time. Imagine a world where pictures couldn't be printed easily, and then suddenly, printing presses could copy images like never before. Solomon's painting was copied over and over, and it started appearing on posters, prayer cards, church bulletins, and even stained glass windows. Churches loved it because it was easy to use, and it gave people a sense of closeness to Jesus. It wasn't about facts, it was about feelings. People didn't question where the image came from or whether it was accurate because it gave them something they wanted, a way to see Jesus as gentle, loving, and approachable. As the picture spread, it began to feel like it had always been part of the church. Imagine walking into a building and seeing the same friendly face on the walls wherever you went. That's what happened with the head of Christ. It became so common that people stopped wondering where it came from. Some churches hung it above the altar, making it a central part of worship, while others used it in Sunday school classrooms to teach children. The image became a kind of shortcut for imagining Jesus, and over time, people just accepted it without thinking much about how it started. One of the biggest reasons the painting became so widespread was how it made people feel. During the mid-20th century, the world was going through some tough times, including wars and economic struggles. People wanted comfort and hope, and Solomon's painting seemed to offer that. When you looked at it, it felt like Jesus was looking back at you with love and understanding. Churches used this emotional connection to bring people closer to their faith, and the painting became a tool for teaching and inspiring. It wasn't about whether it was true, it was about how it made people feel. As we stated earlier, people noticed that the painting showed a very European-looking Jesus, with light skin, soft brown hair, and blue eyes. Historians and scholars began to say that this image wasn't just inaccurate, it was misleading. It made people forget that Jesus came from a different culture and background. Yet for many people, those details didn't matter. They didn't see the painting as history, they saw it as a symbol of their faith. It was as though Solomon gave the world something to believe in, to look up to, and find hope. The image also became a part of people's homes, not just churches. Families hung it on their walls, put it in picture frames, and carried small versions in their wallets. Imagine having a picture you look at every day, something that feels like it protects you or gives you peace. That's what this painting became for many people. It was more than art, it was personal. Even though it wasn't based on any real evidence of what Jesus looked like, it didn't stop people from feeling connected to it. Another reason the painting spread so far was because of organizations that wanted to share the message of Christianity. Groups like the Salvation Army and missionaries used the image to help spread their beliefs. They printed millions of copies and gave them away for free. The picture was easy to recognize, and it became a way to introduce people to Jesus without using words. The image was so simple and clear that it crossed language barriers, which made it perfect for sharing with people all over the world. Even in places where people didn't know much about Christianity, they began to associate this picture with Jesus. As time went on, though, some people started to question the painting's impact. They wondered if it was a good thing to have such a specific image of Jesus when no one knew what he really looked like. Was it okay for people to think of Jesus as looking European when he wasn't? Some thought the painting made Jesus seem too perfect, almost like a movie star, and not like a real person who lived a humble life. Others worried that it made people forget about the deeper, more important parts of Jesus' message, focusing too much on his face and not enough on his teachings. Despite these concerns, the painting remained popular because it had become so much more than just a picture. It was a symbol of comfort, hope, and faith for millions of people. Even if it wasn't historically accurate, it represented something bigger. The idea of Jesus as someone who cared deeply for everyone. That's why it filled churches, homes, and hearts, even though it wasn't based on fact. It wasn't about what was true, it was about what people needed to see and feel. By the end of the 20th century, the painting had become one of the most reproduced images in the world. Even now, when we know more about its flaws and inaccuracies, it still holds a special place for many. But here's the ironic thing, Solomon's image wasn't the only Jesus Christ image to have gone worldwide. So stay tuned as we explore deeper into the topic. Of Christ. The next image to do this is that of the actor from The Passion of the Christ. The image became so famous and even became accepted as a true image of Jesus is a story that's both surprising and fascinating. It all started with a movie, a powerful and emotional one that left a deep impression on people. The actor, Jim Caviezel, took on the role of Jesus, and his performance was so convincing that for many he didn't just play the part, he became the face of Christ in their minds. It's amazing how something that begins as a piece of entertainment can grow into something so much bigger, something almost sacred. When The Passion of the Christ came out, it wasn't just another movie. It was intense and deeply moving, showing the story of Jesus' last days in a way that felt raw and real. Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus, went through a lot to make his portrayal believable. He wore makeup and prosthetics to look like he was injured during the crucifixion, and his expressions of pain and love were so heartfelt that audiences couldn't look away. People cried, prayed, and reflected as they watched, and when they left the theater, many couldn't shake the image of his face from their minds. It was as if Caviezel's portrayal had given them a new way to imagine Jesus. What's interesting is how that face, the actor's face, started to appear everywhere. People printed still images from the movie and framed them as if they were actual portraits of Jesus. Some churches began to hang these pictures on their walls, and temples in other parts of the world followed, using the image as a symbol of faith and reverence. It's a bit like how Warner Salomon's painting spread, but this time it was a movie. The truth is, there were those that honestly thought that Caviezel was actually Jesus because he was everywhere. But most people knew that he was just an actor. And even for those that knew, the emotions tied to the movie made it easy for people to blur the lines between the character and the man. Jim Caviezel himself has spoken about this. He has said many times that he's just a person, an actor, who had the honor of playing an important role. He doesn't want people to think of him as Jesus, and he's made it clear that the role was about pointing people to God, not himself. Yet the way he looked in the movie, his expressions, his posture, his suffering, they all felt so real to so many that it became hard to separate him from the role. It's like when you see a magician perform an amazing trick. Even though you know it's just a performance, part of you wants to believe it's real. The image of Caviezel as Jesus has become so common that in some places it feels like it's always been there. Walk into certain churches and you'll see his face, gazing down with a look of deep love and sorrow. In homes, his image is displayed on walls next to candles or other religious items, as if it's a window into something holy. People pray in front of it, light candles, and talk to it as if they're speaking directly to Jesus. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply people want to connect with their faith, even if the image they're using isn't actually what they think it is. What makes this story even more interesting is how the image spread so quickly. Do you think you can guess? Well, part of it was because of the internet, where pictures and videos can be shared in seconds. People took pictures from the movie and of the movie poster and posted them online with captions like, "This is how I imagine Jesus," or "The Face of Love." Once those images started circulating, it didn't take long for them to show up in churches, prayer cards, and even as tattoos. It's amazing how something as simple as a still frame from a film can take on such a life of its own. There's also something about the way Caviezel looked in the movie that made it easy for people to accept his image as Jesus. The filmmakers gave him features that seemed timeless. Long hair, a beard, and soft, thoughtful eyes. His face was both familiar and otherworldly, and it fit the idea many people already had of Jesus in their minds. Even though historians tell us that Jesus likely didn't look like that, the image felt right to people, and that feeling was stronger than any fact or evidence. But you won't believe how it's been for the actor. For Caviezel, being the face of Jesus has been both a blessing and a challenge. He's talked about how grateful he is to have played the role and how it deepened his own faith. At the same time, he's reminded people that he's just a man, not the real Jesus, and that they shouldn't focus on his image, but on the message of love and sacrifice that Jesus represents. It's a bit like being mistaken for a superhero. You're glad people admire the character, but you want them to remember you're just wearing the costume. Even with these reminders, the image of Caviezel as Jesus has become a part of modern Christian culture. It's used in art, teaching materials, and even sermons, where pastors sometimes refer to the movie to help illustrate the story of Christ. The emotional impact of the film was so strong that it gave people a new way to see and feel the story, and Caviezel's face became a symbol of that connection. It's a reminder of how powerful visual storytelling can be, especially when it's tied to something as meaningful as faith. But not everyone agrees with how the image has been used. Some people worry that it focuses too much on appearance and not enough on the deeper message of Jesus' life. Others point out that, like Solomon's painting, Caviezel's portrayal doesn't reflect the historical reality of Jesus as a Middle Eastern man. They argue that using an image of a European-looking Jesus can unintentionally exclude or misrepresent the diverse communities that Christianity touches. These are important questions to consider, especially as the image continues to be celebrated and shared. Despite these concerns, the image endures because it represents something more than just a face. For many, it's a way to make their faith feel real and personal, to put a face to a story that has shaped their lives. Whether it's historically accurate or not, the image of Caviezel as Jesus carries a powerful emotional weight that connects people to something bigger than themselves. It's funny how art, in all its forms, can touch hearts and bring people closer to their beliefs. But now that we have seen Jesus Christ through the eyes of artists who portrayed him as they imagined, let's see what he would have actually looked like. So keep watching. Jesus have looked like? Imagine if you could go back in time, thousands of years, to meet Jesus Christ in person. What do you think he would look like? Forget about everything you've seen in movies and all the paintings you've seen. What would he really look like? Well, if you really went back to the time and place where Jesus lived, you might be surprised. What Jesus actually looked like was probably very different from what many of us picture today. To start with, Jesus was a Jewish man who lived over 2,000 years ago in a region called Judea, which is in the Middle East. The people there at that time didn't look anything like the pictures or movies many of us have seen. They had dark skin, dark hair, and dark eyes. Many of us have seen. They had dark skin, dark hair, and dark eyes, features that were common among people from that area. Jesus would have blended in with his community, looking like an ordinary man of his time. He wasn't taller or more striking than others, and the Bible even hints at this. It says in Isaiah chapter 53, verse 2, that there was nothing special about his appearance that would make people notice him. That means Jesus probably looked like any other man you might see walking through a busy marketplace in the Middle East during his time. Now think about his life. Jesus wasn't a king or someone who lived in a palace. He grew up in a small village called Nazareth, working as a carpenter with his earthly father Joseph. Carpentry back then wasn't just about building things. It was hard, physical labor. Imagine lifting heavy wood, using basic tools, and working outside under the sun. This means Jesus would have been strong, with rough hands from years of manual work. His skin would likely have been weathered by the sun and wind, not pale and smooth like we see in some paintings. He was a man who knew what it meant to work hard. Jesus also spent a lot of time walking. He didn't have a horse or a chariot to carry him from place to place. He and his disciples traveled on foot, sometimes long distances, through dusty roads and rocky hills. His feet would have been tough and probably dirty from the journey. This gives us another clue about what he might have looked like. He wasn't someone dressed in luxurious clothes or soft sandals. He would have worn simple garments, likely made of coarse wool, and practical sandals suited for long treks. Let's think about his hair and beard. In most pictures, Jesus is shown with long, flowing hair that looks perfectly brushed. But in reality, Jewish men at that time didn't typically wear their hair that long. It would have been shorter and easier to manage, especially since Jesus lived in a hot climate where long hair might have been uncomfortable. His beard, too, would have been natural and unstyled, just like other men of his time. He didn't have access to fancy grooming tools, so his appearance would have been simple and practical. reflecting his humble lifestyle. Here's one of the most interesting things we've learned about what Jesus might have looked like comes from studies of ancient skulls found in the region where he lived. Scientists and historians have used these skulls to create models of what an average Jewish man from that time might have looked like. These models show a man with a rounder face, a broad nose, and dark eyes. He would have been about 5 feet 5 inches tall, which was the average height for men in that region and era. This might seem short by today's standards, but it was completely normal for his time. Another important detail is his clothing. Jesus didn't wear the long, flowing robes with bright colors that we often see in movies or paintings. His clothes would have been made of simple, undyed wool, likely in earth tones like beige or brown. He might have worn a tunic, which was like a long shirt with a cloak over it for warmth. His sandals would have been made of leather, practical and sturdy for walking long distances. He dressed like the people around him, blending in rather than standing out. It's also important to think about the context of his life. Jesus lived in a time when people didn't have modern conveniences like clean running water or personal hygiene products. Bathing was less frequent and life was dusty and rugged. This means Jesus, like everyone else in his community, probably didn't look polished or pristine. But that doesn't mean he was unkempt. He lived a life of humility and simplicity, and his appearance would have reflected that. What's fascinating is how different this realistic image is from the one many people imagine. The idea of Jesus as a tall, light-skinned man with soft features came much later, influenced by European art during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Artists in Europe painted Jesus to look more like the people in their own culture, which is why we often see him with fair skin and blue eyes in those works. But those images are cultural interpretations, not historical facts. Also note that Jesus' appearance wasn't what made him special. People didn't follow him because he looked different or impressive. They followed him because of what he said, what he did, and how he made them feel. His teachings, kindness, and miracles were what drew people to him, not his physical features. What do you think about the appearance of Jesus Christ? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more.